Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news, and with upgrades due all across the board for the Spanish Grand Prix, it seems Ferrari are preparing a dossier to submit to the FIA of all the expenditures they imagine the teams right now are actually producing, arguably to make sure Red Bull aren't getting up to any funny business. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Really up to the channel. Firstly, let's dive into this. Honda have done an interesting thing really since stepping away from Formula 1 as the kind of official engine provider, at least for the Red Bull team. Seems like despite they try and step away, but still they're here somewhere or another. Of course, the Japanese Grand Prix coming up later this season will be title sponsored by Honda, so it is going to be the Honda Japanese Grand Prix 2022 as kind of is described right here. So October 7th through the 9th of this year, the Japanese Grand Prix goes ahead. It's going to be the Honda Japanese Grand Prix, so they're not doing a particularly good job of stepping away from Formula 1. Of course, now the engines are the Red Bulls, are the Red Bull powertrains or whatever, but rumoured in a few years' time to be kind of rebranding to the Porsche powertrains or whatever, when supposedly that partnership is going to go through. Do wonder whether this kind of livery might make a beautiful return this year. We'll see what Red Bull decide to do, but the whole Honda livery thing that they did last year in kind of recollection of Honda's support of their team. Apparently Honda is still about to be honest in Formula 1. This then, of course, the Spanish Grand Prix is coming up. We've seen an Alpine, they're going to bring some upgrades and new rear wings all across the board, really rear wings, front wings, like under flooring changes, aerodynamic changes all across the board for so many teams. Aston Martin, we believe, are bringing pretty much an entirely new car, a B-spec car to the Spanish Grand Prix that only Lance Stroll is going to have. We talked about that rather interesting a couple of days ago. Riccardo, of course, and the McLaren guys, they're rather optimistic for this weekend as well. They're bringing in some new upgrades. Riccardo's going to say here in a second, but actually rather interesting on the Riccardo side, he actually is going to become this weekend's, I believe, the Australian driver with the most starts in Formula 1, overtaking Mark Webber. So if he does, if he actually does start the race, if something doesn't go drastically wrong in qualifying and the car's a write-off, then he will become the kind of most race starts Formula 1 driver from Australia. Congratulations on that front. Now he actually says this to say on the car: we are bringing some upgrades to the car for the weekends. We performed well at this track in pre-season testing, so it will be interesting to see how our car will perform with the upgrades we have made since then. So we shall see how this goes, but certainly some tracks perform better for some cars and for some teams than for others. We saw in pre-season testing the McLarens were kind of towards the top, then they went a few days later to Bahrain and were pretty much at the back of the field. So some tracks definitely favour their car. Last weekend in Miami wasn't particularly good for them either, not just in terms of the fact that Norris got taken out by Gasly, even though it was kind of a racing incident. Tough to say exactly who was at fault for that one. Norris maybe could have gone wider, Gasly should have checked his mirrors, this type of stuff, but still in terms of pure pace, he didn't really have it that past weekend. So maybe this weekend's will be a different story for McLaren. They've kind of been yo-yoing really. Like the start of the year they were terrible at Bahrain, since then they've been getting quicker. Miami seemed to be a step backwards. Will this be better? Of course they got their podium right with Lando Norris, so Riccardo definitely needs to up the pace, because I'm pretty sure in kind of qualifying Riccardo is actually 5-0 down, like Norris has out-qualified him every single time, and maybe outraced him as well outside of the DNFs. Unfortunate scenes. Of course, the whole Red Bull Mercedes war that we had last season, the Ferrari Red Bull war so far is not nearly as fractious, right? As yet, it's more cordial. They're kind of shaking hands. They seem to be relatively happy about fighting each other. There's been some talk from the drivers and from the teams that it's a different attitude. It feels different fighting with these two teams rather than Mercedes or the mind games or the talk off the kind of track that was going on last year. But honestly, right, as the season progresses, you'd imagine it's going to get rather more tense, as especially if it's a relatively close season, as it seems like it may well be. And we may well be seeing the first signs of that, right? Because there's all this talk right now about the budget cap this season on development and the fact that they believe Red Bull are spending an awful lot of money. Now, Red Bull don't say that's actually the case at all, and then, apparently they're going to try and keep tabs on what these teams are going to do just to make sure they say to the FIA, look, if Red Bull or any other team is doing anything dodgy in terms of the budget cap, getting around things somehow or another, then, they're going to be there to make sure they pounce on it and don't let any, potential cheating activities go down. Of course, some race-by-race updates. Red Bull have done an awful lot so far this season and more to come this weekend, and they believe this is far from the last thing that Red Bull are going to bring, and they also reckon, at least the rumour has it based on Racing News 365, they've only used about 18% of their development budget of about 30 odd million, which is quite impressive given the fact that they brought some significant upgrades through to Imola, they reduced the weight by a few kilograms, changed a few aero things, some small tweaks again in Miami, and then here in Spain they're bringing more upgrades and more aero changes. Apparently they want to save up to about 7 kilos on the car, and apparently there's not necessarily a radical overhaul, but a significant aero package upgrade due for Silverstone as well. So they've got plenty planned here, and I'm sure Ferrari looking at this thing, and I'm going to second, lads, we've barely done anything to our car so far, and you guys apparently have only used 20% of your development budget despite doing all of this type of stuff. So we'll see if that's had any legs really for Ferrari. So apparently, according to Giuliano De Chessa, Ferrari will present a dossier to the FIA on the budget cap, pretty much just breaking down what they believe the teams are doing. Of course, there could be some kind of speculative accounting in here, but they're going to try and keep tabs on and say to the FIA, look, this is what we believe based on these things and our expenditures and what they might have spent on these certain developments, just to make sure no team is doing anything dodgy. I'd imagine, namely Red Bull, right, given they are their chief championship rivals at the moment, because, you know, it's obviously difficult, I guess, for the FIA to monitor all this stuff. You might have to rely on the team's internal accounting to some degree. I don't know if Red Bull and maybe Ferrari or other teams are going to have the possibility to bend the rules a little bit. They're probably going to take advantage of that opportunity, right? So Ferrari are bringing some upgrades here. They want to drop a little bit of weight. They reckon that some of these aero changes they make could be worth up to about 0.3 of a second, which they believe could be enough to catch up to the Red Bull, especially on tracks that might suit them a bit more with less long straights, this type of stuff. And these were the words from Mattia Binotto right a few days ago. I hope that at some point Red Bull will stop development because there's also a budget limit. Otherwise, I don't understand how they can afford it, right? Basically saying, look, they've done so much so far already. I cannot understand how they're going to have, like, you know, all this budget effectively to upgrade every single race. As they say, we don't have the money to update every single race, not because we can't, but because there is a budget constraint. We bring updates when we think the time is right. Saying that, like, look, if Red Bull are doing this now, they've got to slow down at some point. And you know, the whole budget cap and the way if you use your money very smartly, which maybe Red Bull are doing a much better job of their expenditure, right? And there was a whole talk from Helmut Marko that, okay, well, Sainz keep crashing it into the wall. That's not helping Ferrari in terms of their budget. But at the same time, I'm sure they're kind of thinking, okay, hang on a second, how are Red Bull managing this with them, you know, using a very similar budget maybe so far to what we have been for much less results in terms of upgrades. The total budget cap is 140 million. I believe a little bit more than that based on some other races, but I think the development part of that is about 36 million or something in that ballpark. So it seems like Red Bull haven't spent that much yet, but Ferrari are definitely trying to keep tabs on it because as they describe right here, as the article describes, Ferrari is ready to present a report to the FIA with the expenses of each team. In order to not leave anything to chance and to avoid going too far into the season and it may be too late, Ferrari will shortly present a dossier with the expenses of each team to the FIA. Many will wonder how the various teams can verify how much another team is spending, at least in terms of developments. The quantification in terms of cost the FIA has created with regard to each particular update comes into play, both in terms of design and production. There's obviously going to be a hypothetical cost involved, but it can give a good idea of how, you know, a team is competing, at least in terms of how much is spent. Also because the various teams have carefully studied every detail, bringing to the track many module macro components that are similar to, I guess, the other teams. Like, you know, you can maybe figure out exactly what is going on right here. Now, like the article describes that it must not be seen as a protest against the Anglo-Austrian team, that being Red Bull, but of course, given they are their chief rivals, you'd imagine if there's anyone kind of being targeted with this, it would be Red Bull, right? Especially given what we've heard the last few weeks. And seemingly Ferrari very much willing to fight to this war on the kind of budget cap for the rest of the season. So we shall see how that goes, but Ferrari making it very clear indeed, they're not going to take any funny business, I suppose, from the Red Bull side and say, look, we're going to keep a very close eye on exactly how much you guys are spending as much as we possibly can. So, the FIA can take appropriate action if it turns out something is actually going on behind the scenes. Now, speaking of upgrades, it seems like Haas are going to wait on theirs. As Günther Steiner says, we've decided to wait a little bit longer with upgrades as we still think we have performance in our car without them, which we have to get on the track. I think they said 3 to 4 races before some further upgrades come in for the Haas team, so interesting how different teams are approaching it. But, they've got to be concerned, right, because at the start of the year, Haas looks so competitive. They've fallen off the pace since then, haven't really changed much on the car. Other teams are catching up. Aston Martin have made good progress the last few races as well, and they've now got an entirely new car, effectively the B-Spec, coming forward this weekend. So that might make some significant difference. Wanted to mention this as well, because there was some talk a few days ago that effectively the FIA seemed to want 3 race directors. We've got Niels British, we've got Eduardo Freitas. Of course, last season was Michael Massey's sole responsibility. He was effectively ousted from the role at the end of the season, the human error stuff. You guys know how it goes at this point. Now, as Mohammed Ben Sulayem actually said on this, Michael is there and we might use him. I didn't say we were getting rid of him. I said we might use him. He may be in a good place to use it. We are open to everything. So I think he's basically been on the sidelines, Massey, as part of the FIA back home in Australia, kind of chilling. He wants to get back out there as a race director, and apparently they might bring him back. The rumour had it right now that they want to have 3 race directors, and therefore they are kind of open to a Michael Massey return to that box. So we'll see how that goes, if that even happens at all. You do wonder what implications that might have, what kind of backlash that might have from the Mercedes garage. At the same time, you wonder, okay, well, Massey's kind of screwed over Mercedes last year, so maybe he owes them one, and, it's obviously not a situation you want to have, because going in the back of your head, because you want every decision to be perfectly fair and reasonable. But apparently that is a possibility, at least over the upcoming races or next season or for the rest of this year, whatever. If Freitas or Wittich aren't available for whatever reason, Massey could make his glorious return, I suppose, for 3 race directors. So we'll see how that one goes. Of course, the Spanish Grand Prix is coming up this coming weekend. Some interesting stats really here to prepare for the weekend. So Carlos Sainz has never failed to score points at the Spanish Grand Prix. We'll see if that continues this weekend. Of course, he's going to go for the victory this time around. Whether that shall be possible remains to be seen. Now, this also I thought was rather interesting, because Charles Leclerc has had a very different story at the Spanish Grand Prix. These are his results of the last 5. 2017, of course, wasn't racing. 10th, 5th, 4th, and then a DNF in 2020. So yes, also in the points most of the time, apart from 2020. But it is also interesting that all of his race wins in Formula 1 have come from pole position. At Belgium 2019, 2019, Italy that year as well, and then 2 races so far this season, always been on pole. So if he's not on pole this weekend, might be a difficult time, and generally pole position converts very well at this track. I thought this was really cool actually from F1 Stats Guru, looking at all the tracks this year and looking at the conversion rate from pole to win, and the lowest is actually Imola, Monza down here as well, and actually in the 30-odd% range, which is rather interesting, minimum of 5 races per circuit, but Barcelona up here at 74%, so quite far and away actually, they're the kind of race where being on pole seems to be the most important. But very much intrigued your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new as always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.